You thought we wouldn't talk about it? Everyone knows about it by now. The farmers' protests and the government's brutal response to it. We could have simply focused on the policy of 2020, but we think it's very important that we know how we got here and what exactly led to the largest protests in history. So, welcome to our show. Let's talk about agriculture. What are the problems that our agriculture faces? By and large, there are three: lack of infrastructure, economic marginalization, and the third being poor governmental support. So, infrastructure. Oh, and let me just clear it out. When I say lack of infrastructure, we mean that in parts, it's just really not there. Please don't misunderstand us. God knows that we've had enough of that. So, for example, we can talk about lack of transportation, which leads to a lot of farmers that stay in remote areas of our country being cut off from the market. Pair that with a lack of storage, and what do we get? Well, according to the reports of the World Bank, more than 40% of the produced goods get wasted. They don't reach any markets, or water for that matter. In a country that receives an average of 3 months of rainfall, why is it that 55% of our farmers depend solely on rainwater for irrigation? And how is that even enough? Here I'd really like to mention the PMKSY scheme that's actually proven to be extremely beneficial and brilliant, because this uses a method in which water is projected directly to the root area of a crop. So this not only ensures that the water is used efficiently, but it also ensures that the water isn't wasted a lot by evaporation, depercolation, runoff, conveyance, etc. It also maintains the moisture of the soil, and in all it's like a water spa for the crops. And the most important thing to remember about this scheme is that it was only accessible to rich and well-off farmers. Of course, that being said, by 2030, Andheri will most probably be underwater, so it's just about time that everyone has all of the water they'll ever need. Electricity is another basic infrastructural facility that we all require, yet farmers lack. Actually, scratch that, because according to our government, most of our villages are electrified because they define electrified as at least 10% of the village having access to electricity. Do you realize how low of a bar that is? Forget electricity. Take something as basic as mobile network. Imagine if mobile network was only available in 10% of our city. Imagine the chaos that would cause. That's, of course, in case you don't use Vodafone. If you do, well, nothing will change. Business will be normal. Another and our last example is telecommunication. I know it could sound a bit out of place considering the fact that farmers literally do not have access to water and roads. But in a world that's increasingly becoming digital, lack of connectivity can have lasting impacts. Because with better connectivity, our farmers can not only track their resources, they can also market their crops in a better manner, and overall they can just stay connected. And Facebook, we're not talking about you. What is wrong with you? Why do you have so much FOMO? Why do you want to be a part of everything? This brings us to our second issue: economic marginalization. The supply chain of agriculture in India is actually pretty simple. Input companies provide seeds, fertilizers, animals, etc. to farmers. Farmers use this to grow crops, meat, dairy, etc. This produce is then given to wholesalers who buy the produce at low prices but in very high quantities. They sell it to food companies who process the product and package it and finally sell it to us. Although it does seem like this entire procedure has more middlemen than a couple that's really trying to get back together without letting go of their ego, it also has a couple of issues. The first issue being that of MSP, minimum support price. Minimum support price is a price guaranteed by the government for the procurement of grains by government agencies that's decided before sowing season. It's a very, very important part of farmers' livelihoods because farmers constitute of some of India's lowest economic and financial stratas. To give you context, only 25 to a maximum of 50% of the price that we pay for their goods actually reaches them. In industries like the textile industry, farmers are purposely paid 20% less than the market price so as to ensure that the industry remains intact. The entire cotton industry increasingly relying on severely underpaid, mistreated, and overworked laborers. That's definitely not happened in the history of humanity. The second issue is the issue of loaning. See, the agricultural industry is a very expensive business. And so farmers very often they require loans to start off. Private banks do not even reach rural areas. Cooperative banks do, but they require a lot of documentation for them to approve loans. Documentation that farmers often don't have. This leaves us with governmental banks. Governmental banks do provide loans, but due to the aforementioned disadvantages and the size of an average farmer's land, they really can't truly pay off these loans very often, and hence they compound and push the farmers further into debt. So, what has the government done to ensure that this very important part of our culture, society, and economy stays intact? Well, let's go into a bit of history with that. Because it started off with the Green Revolution, a program that was meant to make sure that poor developing countries adopt modern methods so that they can march into a prosperous future. But much like most gender profiles, it didn't live up to its expectations. It wasn't cost effective, and the excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers damaged the environment. Apart from that, we have other measures like the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana. It's an initiative by the government that provides 100 crore farmers with around 6,000 rupees every single year as a minimum income price. Apart from that, we have other schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Mandan scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, the Pradhan... Okay, hang on. Why do all of these schemes have the words Pradhan Mantri in them? Dude, you're literally the Prime Minister of India. You don't have a marketing issue. Despite all of these measures, the state of farmers in India continues to be dire. And I don't think this is a hot take that conservatives can really debate. It's a documented fact. The combination of inadequate resources, lack of governmental support, massive corporate influence, competition, and predatory money lending practices has led to this state of our farmers. And that brings us to the 27th of September, 2020. On that day, the President of our country, Ram Nath Kovind, passed 3 bills, namely the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce, the Essential Commodities Bill, and the Farmers Agreement on Price Assessment and Farm Services Bill. Now, the Modi government says that these 3 bills together will help the farmers because these 3 bills will ensure that the farmers can sell their produce outside their Agriculture Produce Market Committees, APMCs. They also state that the state governments will not levy any fee or cess on these farmers. Another feature is that of contract farming, which is basically farming on the basis of a contract between the producer and the consumer. So basically, the Modi government is trying to sell these 3 bills as bills that will liberalize and privatize the agricultural industry. Doesn't sound too controversial, does it? Maybe at face value. See, the APMCs, Agriculture Produce Market Committees, are extremely important to farmers. What basically happens in these markets is that middlemen buy the produce given by the farmers and the leftover produce is bought by the government at the MSP. APMCs are markets that are established all over the country where farmers can come and sell their produce. Now, the primary concern over here is that this shift from APMCs, farmers think will make them lose the safeguard that MSP has provided them with. And so they'll be at the hands of large corporations that are bound to exploit them. And their concern is extremely valid. 86% of India's cultivable land belongs to small, marginalized farmers who each of them have less than 5 acres of land. And so, in front of a large corporation, they really have no bargaining power. Add to this, the government has now said that it's not mandatory for farmers and large corporations to have written contracts. So, in case large corporations do exploit them, the farmers will not have the ability to take this legal dispute to a court. So, our Prime Minister, not him, the other one, and his best friend, Adani, have invested a lot in the agri and food sector. I don't get this, dude. Replacing middlemen with large corporations has never been the solution. Replacing one evil with a bigger evil is not the solution, my dude. 2 national elections later, we should know this. These bills also faced a lot of criticism and a lot of opposition in both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. The opposition even asked for the resolution of these bills, and the rules state that even if one member asks for the resolution of any bill, it has to be provided. And yet, in this case, the speaker simply refused to do so. So the question has to be asked: how were these bills passed in the first place? When the protests began, the police resorted to attacking the protesters with lathi charge, tear gas, water cannons, and even blocking them with barricades. 6 farmers have died in these protests as of this recording. This is a matter of national shame, not just one specific government. We are literally one enthusiastic Sanghi away from literally biting the hand that feeds us. Farmers all over the country are heading to Delhi to protest against these bills. And what does Modi have to say about this? Well, he says that they've been swayed by the opposition. Okay, so let's debunk that. If the opposition had the ability to sway 250 million people, it would have some real power in the government. So no, they haven't been swayed by the opposition, you dipshit. They've been farming. They've been farming all their lives, so they know what's best for them. Saying that the opposition has swayed them is more insulting to the farmers than it is to the opposition. If we can't protest against the crimes that are committed against the minorities, the marginalized, which are the farmers, students, women, etc., then sir, we don't live in a democracy, we live in a dictatorship. If our response to 250 million people, almost the population of America, stepping out of their houses to peacefully protest is that they're violent, they're extremists, and they're misguided, then we live in a misinformed totalitarian regime. Speak while you still can. In the description of this video, we've included a couple of resources in case you're more interested to learn more about these protests, and also the links to some NGOs that are actually working tirelessly to resolve the issues our farmers are facing. That's a show. Thanks for watching.